So Sandeep in his presentation laid very important prelude for all of us to think upon that how in India children are going to have their education. So after education comes the jobs part, and this particular session is going to discuss about how the youth is going to get their job and what is the future for youth. So the name of the session is The Future is Young, Local Economic Opportunities. I would like to hand it over and welcome Mr. Nishikant Dikshit to take this conversation forward, introduce a context to the session, and also our esteemed panelist. Over to you, Nishi.
Thank you, Mala. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the penultimate session of the day. And just to set the context, India has become the most populous country, and we are going to touch $5 trillion economy very soon. Whatever benefits the society has drawn from, say, direct benefit transfer or JAM, I think those opportunities are there on our way. And apart from that, if we see, there's a huge opportunity in rural area where youth who have got education, they are connected to internet, those are there. And they are looking towards people who are going to shape the destiny of India and how things will unveil over a period of time. So we have a very interesting session today. The session name is The Future is Young, and it's about the local economic opportunities. And we have esteemed panelists with us today. So Alice Guglev, she's joining online. Can we have Alice on screen? So Alice is the Managing Director of Global Development Incubators, and she's joining virtually. Then we have Shri Shailesh Kumar Singh, Secretary Rural Development. He'll be joining us in a while. Then we have Mr. Shirish Kalyani. May I request Shirish to come on stage? He is the Associate Director with Transforming Rural India Foundation. Then we have Anu Mehta, who's the lead Global Opportunity Youth Network. May I request Anu also to come on the stage? And to moderate the session and to take us forward, we have the chairperson of TRI, Ms. Bharti Gupta Namola. May I request ma'am to please come on stage? Can we have a huge round of applause for them? So, as you know, we had regional colloquies in Bhopal, Ranchi on 18th of July and later on in Chhattisgarh. So we have got some, we had a session on rural youth and we have a video and the voices from field we have. May I request Gauri to please play the video?
स्ट्रक्चरल बैरियर्स है वो एजुकेशन और एम्प्लॉयमेंट में बहुत ज्यादा इम्पैक्ट डालने लगे। जो स्टेटस ऑफ यूथ से ज्यादातर युवा हमें अनएम्प्लॉयड मिले और जो अनएम्प्लॉयड है ज्यादातर हमें अनस्किल्ड या अनट्रेन्ड मिले। और रीजंस ऑफ जो अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट है ज्यादातर उन लोगों ने हमें ये बताया कि उनके पास कोई स्किल नहीं है, इसलिए वो उनको कोई काम पे नहीं रखता है, चाहे वो उनको काम नहीं मिलता है।
We don't have exposure for the tribal youth. किसी ने वहां पर इंजीनियरिंग का या जो प्रेस्टिजियस एग्जामिनेशंस हैं, नीट का, जेई का, क्लैट का, इसके बारे में सुना ही नहीं। तो ये एक बहुत ही मेजर इशू है जो हम लोगों ने रियलाइज किया है। द यूएसपी फॉर आवर ट्राइबल यूथ इज देयर ऑनेस्टी, देयर डेडिकेशन, दे आर वेरी हार्ड वर्किंग फेलोज।
युवा सोचता है कि वो जहाँ पे है वहाँ पे मतलब नौकरी करें, लेकिन प्रॉब्लम ये है कि वहाँ पे इतना इम्प्रूव नहीं है। जैसे ग्रेजुएट किया है लेकिन वहाँ पे उसके लिए जॉब सैलरी अच्छी नहीं होगी, तो वहाँ पे प्रॉब्लम ये भी आ जाती है।
हमारे यहाँ बहुत बायस सोसाइटी है। हमारे यहाँ लड़कियों को बहुत डिफरेंट नजरिए से देखा जाता है।
We are able to deliver jobs through quality training in our institutions, customized programs which are industry led and demand led, and the salaries are also premium over market.
AI is knocking your door. Everything is now getting redefined. अभी पूरा हम लोग क्या करते थे, प्रोग्रामिंग पर ध्यान देते थे, लेकिन ये जो एआई आ गया, आप देखेंगे प्रोग्रामिंग का जो एक सेक्टर चल रहा था, जो जॉब प्रोवाइड करता था, वो करीब कम होगा, लेकिन ये दूसरे तरह का जॉब देगा। तो इस मार्केट को हमको पहचानना पड़ेगा।
तो मंजिल तो मिल ही जाएगी भटकते हुए से ही, गुमराह वो है जो कभी घर से निकला ही नहीं।
जनता का आह्वान किया, वर्षों जकड़ी बेड़ियों को तो तोड़ो, क्रांति की मशाल जला गांधी बोले, अपने जो भारत छोड़ो।
Yes, thank you. So the structure is like that. We'll have a short presentation by Anu, who will be talking about a book that we have done, which is about rural youth at work. And post that presentation, I'll request Bharti ma'am to then start the discussion. So may I have Anu, if you can just come and do the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nishi. Can we have the slides on screen? Wonderful. So I know this is the last session of the day, but we want to make it as exciting as possible and talk about young people who are the future of our country and of our economic growth. And what we'll be doing is I'll be taking you through a few slides, post which we'll be having a panel and delving deeper into all of these and many more topics. So essentially, this is a few introductory slides on, as Nishi said, the paper that we've written on getting rural youth to work and connecting them to opportunity, economic opportunity with a place-based approach. As we've been discussing throughout the day, we're at a really exciting point in our in history. We have economic growth, which is increasing steadily. It's been increasing, it's still keeping on increasing. It's slated to keep increasing. We're going to be overtaking the UK. We've overtaken China as with the population. So there's economic growth, and there is also the population growth. We also have a young population. It's the youngest working population in the world. What's also happening is that 2 out of 3 of our young people, that's around 25 crore young people, are rural, live in rural areas. And so these young people are really a focus population for us, because they have so much potential and they can contribute so much to our economy, but currently they are a little disconnected from work, they're currently disconnected from opportunities. So all of us have been thinking about how to change that and how to have these young people participate in the economy, be benefiting from it, but also be the drivers of our growth. The approach that we are proposing to do this is a place-based approach. Now, the place-based approach in our case will be a rural district. In the rural India case, it will be one district. So thinking about district as a unit of change, how do we connect young people to economic opportunities? And the approach is essentially thinking about how to work collaboratively and be local in design, so that it's not kind of a top-down approach, and to include local stakeholders in the designing of any programming that's happening, so that there are things that are being shifted at a systemic level rather than thinking about addressing symptoms. How are we changing how systems work at the district level? Thinking about moving to the next piece of the slide, there are 6 key things that I wanted to cover that the approach really focuses on. One is that everything should be data driven. There should be research and analysis that's done at every step, and so every programming that's done should be data driven. The second is that there should be a collaborative of young people, there should be a collaborative of multi-stakeholders, and there should be a collaborative of sector experts that are coming together really and co-creating solutions at a local, at a district level. The third thing that emerges from the first 2 points are opportunity pathways. These pathways are essentially pathways to connect young people to work. Now, these can be either sector focused, so thinking about agriculture, green jobs, women in the workforce, or they can be youth focused in terms of thinking about how to build young people's agency, how to think about offering young people services at one spot, so through youth hubs, things like that. So how are these kind of opportunity pathways being built out as a result of this ecosystem mapping of the research and analysis and the collaborative infrastructure? So the opportunity pathways are broadly two categories. It's either entrepreneurship or jobs. And within entrepreneurship, there are several categories, etc., which I won't get into now, but they've been delved into in great depth in the paper. So would encourage everybody to read that if that's of interest. Then is the use of data and technology. So this kind of connects to the first point, in that how do we not have only a mapping at the beginning, but also consistently use data that's coming out of the programming to feedback into program design, so that programming becomes, there's a feedback loop and programming becomes very, very data driven, and using technology to do this. So using technology to map not only youth outcomes and youth shifts, but also ecosystem shifts. How is the ecosystem moving? How is kind of like the gross district product example moving? And if we have technology, then these things can also be measured. The last couple of things are measuring impact, going beyond kind of thinking about how many youth are placed or how many youth are trained, and really going to thinking about income, savings, and assets. How is income increasing? How are savings increasing? Are they increasing? And what assets are being built at an individual and a community level? And then the last really important thing is learning. So because the GeoVine is present in many countries across the world, in 7 different countries across the world, and most importantly, we're now in 15 rural districts in India. How are these communities learning from each other? How are best practices being shared? How are failures being shared? So that there is a very, very cohesive kind of development approach, and that best practices are replicated and gaps are overcome even faster. So that's kind of like the first piece. The second piece is that anchor partners are really, really at the core of this approach. They're really the backbone of this approach. And these are trusted local entities. So for example, TRI are the anchor partner for our rural India communities. And what they do is they take this place-based approach, which is very high level. It's very, how would I say it? It's very dynamic, and they contextualize it to the district. So how is this kind of applicable at the district level? How is kind of like a collaborative infrastructure translated into what happens at the district? Who is on that collaborative infrastructure? So this is something that our anchor partners kind of build out. And how they do this is through convening, capacity enhancement of partners, and deep relationship building. So it's not setting up a new program. That's also why we've kind of highlighted that in red. So it's not like a new livelihoods program. It's essentially coming together and convergence of what is existing, whether it's structures, whether it's programs, whether it's resources. And it's addressing gaps in systems that are there to build on new things. So it's not GeoVine and then like other programs. It's GeoVine approach and then fitting in other programs using this approach of research analysis, data and technology, getting opportunity pathways, having young people contribute in program design, etc. So this was something that I wanted to spend some time on. Like I was saying, district is a unit of change. It's a very actionable and measurable unit of change. And there are multiple things that need to be happening. So it's not only running one skilling program at the district, but it's also convergence. It's also thinking about themes such as the future of work. It's also thinking about what are the key sectors in that district, what are value chains that can be developed, what are jobs that can be created, what are entrepreneurship opportunities, etc. And thinking about things like youth voice and journeys. What is a young person's journey between different pathways, because they will switch between self-employment and jobs and then going back to self-employment, entrepreneurship, etc. And very, very importantly, M&E and learning, and how is that feeding into future program design. So just all of these kind of interventions coming together at a district level to create a real shift at the district level, not only for some young people, but after a point for all young people when it reaches that tipping point. Like I said, no one solution is sufficient. from the previous slide, and there are multiple different things that can be done around livelihoods and markets, entrepreneurship, sectors and skills, and young people moving between these opportunities. And then there are, of course, enabling environments that are not youth-facing interventions, but what is the digital infrastructure look like? What is the family and community attitude? Is there transport available? What does inclusion look like, etc.? And then, of course, also financing opportunities. So when all of these things kind of come together and we are working on all of these things together at one district, then we start thinking about how many young people there are at a district and how many of them can be placed into these kind of different pathways. One of the most important things I also wanted to cover is that while skilling is really, really important, young people need many, many supports before training and after training. Importantly, after they are placed into the workforce, whether it's entrepreneurship or jobs, how do they stay in the workforce? So thinking about retention, thinking about how they get mentorship after they are placed in, and once they stay in the workforce for around 2 years, then we know that there's a lesser likelihood of them dropping out. And also before skilling, how we think about things like aptitude testing, how we think about recognition of prior learning, etc. Thinking about also, very importantly, agency building of young people and how they're perceiving themselves and their roles in the community. So this end-to-end solutioning is needed. Not all young people will need all services, but really think about what a young person needs from this whole range of services and have them access it, preferably at one point, which is in our case, the youth hubs. And even if it's not directly available, how can they be referred to those services? Thinking about only preparing youth for the workforce is one side of the problem, but also thinking about how to prepare the workforce for youth is the next side of the problem. So young people want to stay back at the rural district, but they don't really have opportunities there. So what are different things that can be done to support young people to get jobs? Because not everybody can become an entrepreneur. There should also be some jobs, and not everybody can get a job. So it should be a balance, and these are some things that can be done to prepare the workforce to absorb these large numbers of young people, which we've, by the way, found that at least in the districts that we are working in, as we started working in Badwani, for example, last year, and we found that there were around 3 lakh young people that needed this kind of support. So what we're calling opportunity youth. There are around 3 lakh people that are either underemployed or unemployed or need support to get sustainable work. And to really think about how are we thinking about 3 lakh young people. So it's not about training like 5,000 people or 7,000 people. It's about absorbing 3 lakh people into the labor force. And so the way this can be done is, this is a Badwani sample, but this should ideally be done at district level, where we're thinking about what is the total size of the problem, what are the different pathways, whether it's jobs, entrepreneurship, whether it's farm, non-farm, and where these young people can be absorbed. So this is highly, highly contextualized. It will change by district. Sometimes it even changes by block. But how are we thinking about this? And how are we, most importantly, I'll skip over this. This is like mostly convergence. But how are we thinking about this until we reach that point number 4 in my slide, which is where the funding decreases and the impact starts increasing. So how are we getting to a tipping point where young people that are direct beneficiaries of our programming are getting supports, but also all young people in that district are getting support because of enough services being available, enough jobs being available. So how are we thinking about that tipping point and reaching that? So that is how much work is needed at each district. And this, when we think about 25 crore young people, it's really, really hard to kind of envision fitting all of them into the workforce. But when we are thinking about it at district level, it becomes much, much more kind of addressable. And then lastly, just to think about how pockets of success are emerging, even thinking through the last to last session, where we had representation from government as well as private sector, and talked about the role of private sector and how private sector can pilot interesting innovations, etc. So these pockets are really emerging, but how should there be convergence, and how can all of these considerable amounts of resources that are being put in talking to each other and working better together with each other? And lastly, also just thinking about how young people's life cycle changes are thought about as life cycle changes and not measured against reporting cycles or programming cycles. So just to think about that as well. And then ending with saying that these are 5 big ideas to really think about this place-based approach for youth employment. Thinking about district as a unit of change, that's one. thinking about how to not only skill people but also think about increasing rural economic opportunities, so there are actually jobs available at the district. The third thing is no one solution will work. We need a suite of all solutions. The fourth thing is having youth voice be a critical part of all programming, as well as long-term outcomes tracking, so that young people's voices are being heard and outcomes are being tracked at over a longer period. And the last point is around convergence. So how are these convergences happening at the district, state, and national level? Like I said at the beginning, there's a paper that we've written on this, and that it's about a 100-page document that delves very, very deeply into each of these topics. So it'll be available online. Yeah, sure. So it'll be available online, but would recommend that everybody refer to this in case there's an area of interest on any specific topics. So with that, I will wrap and hand over to Bharti. Yeah? Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome. We'll like to have a round of applause for our secretary, Shri Shailesh Kumar Singh, sir. So sir, we have just had a. Please have a seat, sir. So we were just presenting. If you can just have a last slide, if you could just present again for the, so that sir may know. And what is that white paper about? Huh?
So we just finished 2 seconds ago, so you haven't missed it. So we're thinking about how to place rural youth into work. What does that look like? And we're the thing that we are recommending is a place-based approach to connect all rural youth, to connect young India to economic opportunity. And there's a whole detailed paper. It's about a 100-page paper. But critically, there are these 5 points that we're talking about. One is about how to think about district as a unit of change. So if there are around 3 lakh from the districts that we worked in, there are around 2.5 to 3 lakh young people who need this kind of support. And if there are around that kind of number, then district becomes an addressable unit. Secondly, it also becomes easier to think about a labor absorption plan like this one that we did for Badwani district, for example. What are different pathways that can be fit in? So that's the first real idea about thinking about district as unit of change. The second thing is that we can prepare young people for the workforce, but then how do we also think about increasing economic activity at the rural level so that there are actually opportunities for young people? And then what's emerging over here is that all of these different models, thinking about producer organizations, thinking about distributed manufacturing, thinking about value chain development, increase localized processing, etc. So that's really the second point. The third point is that no one solution is sufficient. You need like many solutions, which is essentially this, that you need connection to livelihoods and markets. You need to think about entrepreneurship, sectors and skills, etc. And also enabling environments. So with digital infrastructure, community attitudes, how young people are thinking about themselves, financing. The fourth point is, oops, can we go back? Yeah. So the fourth point is thinking about youth voice and aspirations and tracking outcomes over a longer term. So as recipients of the services, how are young people participating in every stage of the designing and really including their inputs into every stage of the process? And then also longer term outcomes tracking. So how are we really tracking long-term youth journeys and thinking about not only numbers placed and trained, but also thinking about income savings and assets. And then the last one is that convergence of youth employment programming. So there's a lot of really good work that's already happening across private and public sector. So how are we facilitating kind of more efficient convergence at the district level of all of this work? And then the last thing is around how much work needs to be done is till we reach that tipping point where we have enough services for young people and we have enough opportunities for young people, at which point investment starts decreasing and impact starts increasing. So how are we getting to that point in a district? So it's not about kind of like skilling maybe like 2,000 or 3,000 young people. It's about really thinking about mass absorption into the labor force. So very quickly, that's what the paper is, and we would be very honored if you would unveil the paper.
I would just introduce the panel, sir. So on your left-hand side, sir, he's Shirish Kalyani. So he's Associate Director with the TRIF. Then on your right side is Ms. Bharti Gupta Ramola. She's the Chairperson of TRIF. And then we have Anu Mehta from Global Opportunity Youth Network. And then we have Alice, who's joining online. She's the Managing Director of Global Incubator Net. So over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Nishi. And thank you to all of you for being here today, and especially to you, Secretary. I thought we'd begin with trying to get this very talented panel to give us their take on the topic itself, which is the future is young. You know, we've all heard a lot about what the demography means for India and also for Africa. Alice, as you're sitting in Africa right now, perhaps I'll begin with you and ask you to really just look at this whole issue of you know, the opportunity that may be there with the future is young, and you know, without sort of going into the gloom and doom that we sometimes feel in developing countries about the lack of skill and the lack of education of our youth. How do you see the opportunity?
Thank you, and greetings, and wonderful to see such a great panel, and thank you, Secretary and others, for joining our event. My name is Alice Gugilev. I'm with Global Development Incubator, as mentioned, based in Nairobi, Kenya, but have been collaborating and working throughout India for the last 10 years or so. So there's three main points I'd like to share in my opening. The first is how we really think about the scale of how many young people we have. So where, you know, Anu had mentioned 25 crore young people in the rural areas of India, 25 crore. That's such a huge number. And it's bigger than many countries, just our young people in India. And we can see it as a very negative thing, that this is a problem to be solved. And in some cases, it can lead to unrest and so many challenges that we're seeing. On the other hand, this is an incredible moment in time where we can unlock human capital, human potential, but we have to design for scale. And so it's such a staggering number that even with all of the fantastic national programs that we see across the country, they're reaching, let's say, 2-3 lakh per year, sometimes at best. And so how do we rethink and start to design for scale to unlock this human potential? And so this is an approach where we can really have a pathway to answering this very difficult question. And so taking it down to the district level, we can really think through how many young people are there. And as has been mentioned, we work in across the country. So districts like Ramgarh in Jharkhand, Barwani in MP, Raichur in Karnataka, all of them are looking at 70-80% plus youth not really participating in the labor force. And so you're seeing 2.5, 3+ lack of young people out of work, out of education, out of training. And so if we can take it down to this district level and design for scale, we can really have a clear pathway across the entire country to have this kind of transformation that we're looking at. So it's really kind of changing that narrative from just that national level picture and thinking of this as an incredible resource to tap into at the local district level. The second thing is I'd love to see if we can change the narrative as well around skilling. So much of our work is skilling based. Instead, if we can flip it to labor absorption. And when we start to think about this, the questions of, is it entrepreneurship? Is it placement into jobs? Is it migration? Is it digital skills? What are all these things? Well, the reality is it's all of those. And so how do we really identify what are the sectors, what are the services, what are the kinds of livelihoods that people can start, and really have labor absorption at the scale of the challenge that we're looking at, or in the case that we're trying to position it here, the opportunity. So really mapping out in detail what are the pathways for labor absorption and how do we get there at the district level is absolutely key. And the third area I'd love to talk about is, essentially the problem that we all have in Africa and in India. In Africa by 2050, we're looking at 100 crore young people across the entire continent. And so it is a massive challenge. And most of them are in the rural areas. And we cannot sustain the migration, whether it's in Africa or in India. And so how do you really shift much more economic development to the rural areas? How do you think through this rural renaissance, as is the name of this session? How do we really bring an increased economic activity in our rural parts of the world? And so this is a huge piece that people are not addressing. Young people, majority, do want to stay in their rural districts from all of our discussions, but we have to have those economic opportunities for them so that they can really access that. And so shifting this to much more of a inclusive economic development model through everything at our disposal, variety of innovations that many have talked to in terms of distributed manufacturing, energy, franchising, local livelihoods. There's so much to be done, as well as a lot more around value chain development. And so if we can really think through designing for the scale of the challenge, really considering labor absorption if we can, and finally thinking through this rural renaissance and economic development at the rural districts, this will really have a pathway that can drive towards an incredible opportunity of unlocking human capital. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. And then maybe we'll come back to the India level again. And Mr. Singh, if you could just give us your take on the topic, and also in some way perhaps respond to the proposition that Alice and Anu have made in terms of saying let's take a place-based approach. Let's look at labor absorption and everything else that follows it. So please.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, my apologies for the delay in coming. Just as I was about to leave, something really important sprang up, so I had to attend to that. Thanks a lot for inviting me here to this session on rural renaissance. TRIF has been partnering with us in all aspects of the work that we do, and it's been quite an enlightening experience working with you, partnering with you. As you are aware, we are following a whole of government approach toward the problems of rural India. In the ministry, we are running 5, 6 flagship programs which cater to different aspects of rural development. As you are aware, MG Narega is one of the largest social security programs. In addition to that, its implementation leads to a lot of creation of durable assets and a lot of work in the area of natural resource management, agriculture and allied activities, community assets, individual assets as well. Then we have this massive program of National Rural Livelihood Mission, within which, as you are all aware, we have more than 9 crore households, 9 crore households in the rural areas, which means if you multiply by 4 or 5, roughly about 40 crore population we are touching through that. And it has a wide set of activities within the program, mostly related to institution building, capacity building, financing, various social and financial inclusion measures, and livelihood generation, the most important of all, within the farm and the non-farm sector. So this is a really massive, a really great vehicle that we as a society, we in the government, we've been able to create with the help of all, with the help of the states, with the help of all the stakeholders. And a lot of things can be channelized through this vehicle. As you would be aware, in the budget announcement of this year, the Honorable Finance Minister gave a lot of emphasis on creation of entrepreneurship, and we are working toward that. We are working toward creating collectives of women in various enterprises. We also have a skilling program, as you are aware, the DDU-GKY and the Rural Self-Employment Training Institutes all over the country. But as was very rightly pointed out, the scale is not commensurate to the requirement, the demand that we have in the villages, in the rural areas, in the districts. So there are lakhs of youths within each district which need to be trained, skilled, and which need to be absorbed in the labor force, as you said. And the skilling facility that we make available to these youth are not commensurate with that requirement. We need to scale that up. In this, we would certainly need your inputs, how to go about it, what should be the mechanism. As you very rightly pointed out, this is a great opportunity for us. We can look at it as an opportunity. This unique demographic structure that we are experiencing at this point in our history, this is actually, if we can look at it as a unique opportunity, and if we really are able to provide skills, education, and employment to these youth, that will lead to transformation of the country, of the whole society, and maybe the world. So I would like to get these inputs from you. We in the ministry would like to get these inputs from you as to how we go about this. Yes, we should have a place-based approach, as you call it. We should have the districts as the unit of this development, the growth. We already have within the government. Districts are a very, very important unit of our entire effort toward development and all activities of the government. Districts are an extremely important unit. So this approach is a very much logical approach, that the approach that you are suggesting, and it can enmesh with the various programs that we have, and it can also inform the programs and systems through which we do our work. In terms of skilling, as I mentioned, we need a lot of scaling up to do. For that, what exactly needs to be done? We need to think about that. We all need to think. So from these deliberations, let's hope that something emerges which leads to informing that process. So with these words, I end here, and I would like to invite suggestions whenever the house is thrown open. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Singh. So maybe now I'll go down to the ground and ask Shirish to speak a little bit about your own experience, Shirish, just working in the district, in the blocks, in the villages, and how do you see the future's young as a sort of postulate, and what opportunities do you see to make the promise of that future come true?
Yeah, thank you so much. The future is young, but it is in the recent past that I was young myself, and yeah, as they say, 40s is the old age of youth and 50s is the youth of old age. So I hope I get to be young again pretty soon. So thank you so much. Honored to be a part of this panel with esteemed speakers. Shailesh Singh sir, whom we look up to for guidance, and I had an honor to unveil the book. But while unveiling the book, I couldn't help but think of my colleagues Neeraj, Aliva, Anushri, and all others who actually put hard work along with Anu and other members to put this through. So kudos to you guys. I went through the report and it's brilliant. Would help a lot in shaping our work in the due course. In terms of field, for that I'll like to in fact pick up some snippets from the report as well as what sir mentioned. I on the field see a aspiration opportunity paradox. There is this growing aspiration, partly due to economic growth, splendid economic growth, in fact. But especially after the advent of internet and smartphones, the rural youth is highly aspiring. So is the entire, I think, population in the rural areas, while being careful about not homogenizing everyone. I say pretty safely that aspiration has risen tremendously. But at the same time, we do not have opportunities to match those aspirations, especially in the places that these people are located. As rightly pointed out in the report as well, or as sir was mentioning, that we cater to a small number every year. Does that mean that that is the only way to go ahead? No, because there is a tremendous potential of catering this entire population that we work with. But before that, we'll have to look where this population actually is engaged in, and currently that is agriculture. And as we see, the factor productivity of agriculture is on decline. Many of our surveys also has pointed that out, including the survey by NSSO, or the Agri Department took up a study, and all of it actually showed that the factor productivity has decreased. Now, what is the size of this decrease, or what is actually, if you see proportionate to their other counterparts, especially in the urban areas, you see that an agriculture or a daily wage worker in urban areas in non-formal sector earns at least 18x of an agriculture worker in rural areas. And if he or she is in the private sector in urban area, that goes up to 25x. Forget urban area, even in the rural area, if we look at the data, an agriculture, let's say, landholder would earn 1.5 times. If it's in the non-farm sector, it would be 2.5 times. And if it's a self-employed person, it's 4x of what a worker would get. So that there is a tremendous, despite despite a large number of population being dependent on agriculture wage labor, there is now a solid disincentive in continuing in agriculture. And that is why we also see that youth of today do not want to get into agriculture, precisely because of the factor productivity decrease. Now then, in that case, what is the option? I think as we are mentioning, place-based opportunities has to be enhanced. But how do we do that? So we have to look at manufacturing in rural areas as an option, apart from the primary sector interventions that we are making, or even the service sector interventions. Both the sectors have not been able to cater to the imagination or aspirations that the areas has, and manufacturing has to be strengthened. We have been talking about it from our first plan. In fact, right after independence also, the Bombay plan that was made by the industrialists had all these elements, but unfortunately we have not been able to do that as yet. So, and again, youth, we speak of rural youth, but it's not a homogeneous community. So we'll have to, so we have various programs. As sir was mentioning, we have Narega, we have DDU-JKY, we have NRLM, mobilized community, and we now have an unprecedented opportunity to actually do what we are speaking. We can actually create all those opportunities on the ground. Again, district as an unit is an important aspect, because I believe even in our administrative system, collector or the magistrate is that person, district magistrate is that person who can actually bring about that convergence of all these various programs. Now, if I see the types of youth that we work with, ma'am, as you asked me, one is, so there are, of course, like I said, no homogeneous community, but and the usual layers of gender, caste and other barriers that actually many of our youth face. There is a geographical dimension to it as well. So our programs, let's say, of skill development could be good for geographies that are near urban areas, near large urban areas that do, and where a skill development training can actually easily get a person a job, and that enhances that income by exponential means. Now then the second area is, let's say, our region, northern region of Bihar, UP and other places, wherein that approach may not work, because even if you skill a person very well, as Anu was also mentioning in her presentation, where are the opportunities? That person necessarily may not get a job. And for them, then you'll have to look into high value agriculture, and again, as I was mentioning, manufacturing sector. I was in Ratlam, sir, a few days back, in Jhabua, in fact, and border of Ratlam and Jhabua, and we met a few youth there, and we were very surprised that those youth were very keen to get into farming. And we were like, yaar, pura Bharat jana nahi cha raha hai farming mein, aap kyun jana cha rahe ho? And that youth said कि हम तो यहाँ सब लोग फार्मिंग में जाना चाहते हैं. तो मैंने पूछा क्यों? तो ही वाज लाइक कि ये हम वो खेती नहीं कर रहे जिससे सिर्फ पेट भरता है, हम तो हमारी शौक पूरी करने वाली खेती कर रहे हैं. And they were into orchards, horticulture and also primary processing interventions. So these are the kind of things that we'll have to think of in this area. And then there is this third entire remote area, the places that we work in, especially in Central Indian belt, in Chhattisgarh, for example, where I am placed. And there you will have no choice but to, of course, work on agriculture and increasing productivity, but to actually create these growth clusters, the hubs, the economic hubs that we are talking of. And these growth clusters can actually create opportunities. So right now, even if we are promoting self-employment, sir, in these places, they are single occupation enterprises. Like, they can accommodate a single person. दुकान खोल दी या आपने कुछ रिक्शा दे दिया या ऐसी चीजें कर दी. But we have to create, I'm sorry, Alice, I switched to Hindi in between. So we now can have to create economic hubs, and for that we have all the programs. To give an example, and I'll just wrap up what I'm saying. I was placed in Dantewada, sir, 10 years back, and we started the country's first livelihood college there. It was a skill development institution. Now we ran all in the erstwhile Swarna Jayanti Gram Swarozgar Yojana. There used to be a special program for skilling of youth. Now we ran all those programs there. At the same time, Narega was also being implemented. At the same time, you had NRLM coming up then only. But then, there were youth who actually had 50 to 60 acres of land in their homes. But they were being given training into tailoring, and they were sent to Chennai. The first batch was actually sent to Chennai from Dantewada, and there they were getting, at that time, 6,000-7,000 rupees per month, and weren't living in very good conditions. So all of them came back in a couple of months. Now we had the opportunity actually to either do something on their farms, they use our skill development programs for their benefit, or could have created a growth clusters. Right now there are efforts in the country that are actually doing this. So using programs like Narega, sir, from the department, economic hubs are being created. In Chhattisgarh, there is a program called Rural Industrial Park, where every village has almost a 3-acre of area wherein such hubs are being created, where urban-like facilities are being provided to rural counterparts to start their economic activities, and hand-to-hand support is being. So it's an interesting experiment, and we are looking at it. TRIF is a partner in that program, and we are looking at it with great enthusiasm. So I think these are the opportunities on the field that are growing, and I think we need to look at such opportunities very seriously and grow them further.
Thank you. Thank you, Rishi. So I want to try to be a bit contrarian right now. And I'll start with Mr. Singh with my contrarian question. At some level, everything that has been said in the last half an hour or so, it's stuff we've seen before, heard before. Somebody's tried it somewhere. I guess the question that I'm asking is, what is it that needs to be different going forward for us to actually be able to absorb 250 to 300,000 people per district and make them productive citizens of the country? What needs to shift? And maybe the top 1 or 2 things. I'm sure lots of things have to shift. But what are the top 1 or 2 things that have to shift?
As was very rightly pointed out, you see the farm sector, agriculture, the factor productivity is low, and the actual employment capacity is also low. So there's a lot of disguised employment as well. So if we actually want to absorb all these youth in meaningful employment, I think, in my opinion, manufacturing is the option, is the only option, manufacturing and as well as services. So we have to switch to the secondary and the tertiary sectors. This is a must in a cluster-based approach. You can do it. So this is the only answer. We cannot indefinitely continue to depend on the farm sector for providing employment to the youth.
Please, Anu.
So just to respond to all of the points actually that were made, a couple of things. One is really simple things like mapping the aspirational income level. So when we asked young people how much money do you need to earn, so that you don't go out of the district. Everybody had a number. So for example, in Ramgarh in Jharkhand, when we asked them, right after the pandemic, it was 1 to 1.2 lakhs. In Western UP, it's higher. It's 2.5 to 3 lakhs per annum. In Eastern UP, it's 1.5 to 2.5 lakhs per annum. So everybody knows these answers. Like you said, it's already been done, or it's intuitively known if you're working at the state level, and you know these numbers. But what if it's mapped? What if it's written down, documented as part of the data collection that we do, as part of like district administration, state governments, etc. When we do the labor market mapping, for example, when we do the industries mapping, if this number is also mapped, and then thinking about how these young people can like fit into different income generation pathways, so that this number is met. So some will come from agriculture, some will come from being an agri-entrepreneur, some will come from some small production somewhere. So how are we creating these bundles? Now this also intuitively we know 2 hours will go in poultry, then you can go to pick up the kids from school, and then you can go to the field to work. So this is there, but if we can make these different bundles so that there's different ideas for young people to come and see that these are all available, and here's what we could do so that we're meeting this target. If it's written for them on paper, then they know that we don't need to migrate out for the wage labor in the off season of agriculture. So that's one thing that I wanted to say. The second thing is, sir, to respond to your point, these are really fantastic vehicles for us to do all of the work, because there's such strong frameworks that are built. So anything that can be done through SHGs, there's such a strong social capital that's already there. Just one thing to say is that we already have a partnership with RCT that's doing this. So how are we providing services to young people before the skilling of RCT as well as after the skilling? So after they're skilled, how is the business management done? How is the kind of growth looked at? How are kind of compliance is done? Also, there was a book that we had done on 80 occupations, 80 different things that young people can do to become entrepreneurs. So if they see these 80 options, then they know that I don't have to only do beauty parlor or only do tailoring or only do electrical or whatever. There are so many different options. So all of these different things can be value adds around already these very, very strong structures which are existing. So similarly, if there can be partnerships with DDU, GKY as well as NRLM to see what is already there and what is strong and what are gaps that can come in by, that can be played by CSOs, that can be played by other government agencies even possibly, that can be filled in by say like tribal funding from the gap funding from the state. So how can all of this kind of come together and further strengthen these? So that is something, if it's done at a district, it's already done. But if all of it is done together in one district, then there's a shift, because otherwise you will see one Axis Bank Foundation doing amazing work here, or you'll see one kind of program working really well over here, or MSDF doing something, or the Gates Foundation doing something, and all of these kind of private sector programming is making a very small dent. But if all of it comes together and is really like pushing the fuel behind all of these kind of frameworks that are there, government programs that are there, then it can create a shift, because then it goes back to building out solutions for such large.
Thank you. Thank you. And Alice, do you
May I
want to
also?
add to that? Yes.
Yes, thank you so much as well. And I love the contrarian questions as always. Otherwise, it's not an exciting panel. So maybe I'll mention 3 things. It's true, this has worked in some places in the world. And I would say people have not adopted this enough, especially the intentionality around economic growth. And so what we're talking about is not just national economic growth across the country, but very much at the state and district level. So the first thing that I would see is a recognition, and this is a global recognition, that these economic activities need to shift. And I would start of how this could be different with point number 1, which is around really mapping out across the state at the district, and I really like the district cluster level as well, what kind of manufacturing? What are the local assets that exist? What are the programs that exist? We were just in MP and talking about how there's so many amazing government programs, but are not utilized. You know, there's existing capital there for investing in value addition across various agricultural sectors, but the money's just sitting there at the state level. How do you really unlock that in a very intentional way that drives labor absorption, that drives economic activity? And so step one, I would really say, can we at the state level really start to map out districts and district clusters that go even beyond the one service or one product per district policies that currently exist? It's gonna be that and more than that. And so really thinking through that research, that mapping, we can do that right away and very quickly. There's already a lot of great books that exist at the state level. People aren't using them enough. And how do we really make them come alive and think through what that economic development plan is going to look like? Otherwise, there just won't be enough economic opportunities for young people, as has already been mentioned. So one is kind of this mapping that we can build on what's been done and really extend that much further. The second thing I'll mention is how do we start to reward outcomes, reward placement, reward income generation? What I really love about the NRLM program and MG Narega and so many of these others is that you've been paying for incredible growth in savings, income, asset building. Why is it that for youth programs, we're not paying for those things? We're paying for skilling. And yes, you know, DDU, GKY and PMKVY, these are great programs. They are starting to think that way as well. And so how do we start shifting people's views to paying for outcomes of income generation, savings, and asset building? So I think this could be a really big difference for youth programming that hasn't been done before, but has been successful in other programs across India. In fact, India is the world leader in all of this kind of a social infrastructure that already exists at the district and state level. It's incredible, right? We have in India all of these existing incredible programs and infrastructure. How do we build on that and really be a global leader in how we can demonstrate rural economic development? The third point I'll mention that is a difference from the past, there's kind of a supply and demand shift here. The kind of the economic growth side that has changed so much is that we have people talk about the future of work, and they're always talking about fourth industrial revolution. They're talking about AI, all of these things. But I like to think about it from a distributed manufacturing perspective, from a distributed services perspective, the proliferation of internet access, the proliferation of technology that is not based on scale, that it's not just the marginal cost decline based on scale, but actually that you can have high quality local manufacturing, distributed manufacturing, off-grid energy provision. These are incredible innovations. And this is in many ways the fourth industrial revolution that we can see, not just AI, but this kind of distribution of economic power. And similarly, a shift that has happened is with young people themselves. They want to take agency over their own lives. They're connected. They understand. They have these aspirations that was already very eloquently discussed. And so they can reach for those opportunities much better if we can make those connections and also value their own agency rather than keep, top down, spoon feeding them information. So our young people have changed. Our young people are shifting. So if we can meet them where they are, give them the information and tools, they can come much more than halfway compared to the young people of the past. So indeed, I think things have been tried, but I also think that the world has really shifted. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. So maybe I'll come back to you, Mr. Singh, before I give Shishir another chance. We talk about mega trends, and we talk about technology, we talk about communication, we talk about what's happening with social media, we talk about the convergence of all these things. Do these convergences sort of spell some sort of an opportunity in terms of what we can do with rural India? And how is your department thinking about it?
Most certainly, the technological transformations that we are seeing, the mega trends that you talked about, they hold a lot of potential for economic emancipation of not only the youth, everybody. So this distributed manufacturing that was talked about. You see, we saw the internet revolution, and now we are in the midst of the AI revolution. So it didn't take much time. It spread all over the world. Now you have the best technology available in a very short matter of time in any place. So this is a great opportunity on which we can leverage to go for distributed services, manufacturing, etc., which can lead to really great economic outcomes for the rural areas. At this point, as I said, we are thinking over it. We are trying to design systems based on that. Our flagship programs that we mentioned at this point, they do not actually leverage these great opportunities that we have in terms of technology, but surely we do intend to do that very soon.
Thank you. So, and I think that's a great opportunity. I mean, not just technology per se, but what India has been able to do with the payment systems, and with the proliferation. What I mean is not just AI and IoT, but a whole bunch of other things we've been able to do with what's possible in terms of payments, what's possible in terms of communication, and all of that. Shishir, on the ground, do you see any of this beginning to change the way in which people think, other than having smartphones?
Ma'am, before I answer that, I'd quickly like to respond to a couple of points that were raised. So we are talking of convergence and multi-stakeholder platforms, but according to me, on the ground at this moment, we don't have mechanisms for that. So we have on one hand a collector which might be heading like more than 150 to 200 committees. We don't have actually platforms where what we talk of Samaj Sarkar Bazaar can come together. There is no committee where all the NGOs are partner, or not only CSOs, but the philanthropist or the private sector especially, who sits together and deliberate on things. Most of them might be in the form of review committees. So one opportunity that I see is to develop those platforms wherein the government can maybe take lead in this, wherein such deliberation of the districts can happen. We also spoke of the large mobilization, especially under NRLM, that we have done, and the numbers run in crores. But at the same moment, I wonder where are the mobilization platforms for youth? Right now, our youth has no platform actually in the village to express himself or herself. So the women are meeting every week and following their Panchasutras, saving money, and doing or Dasha Sutras now, and doing a lot of economic as well as other activities. We do not have such platforms for youth. So youth who might be in fact earning money through their whatever employment or self-employment they are doing, we are not actually inculcating these habits into them. And right now there is no platform, nobody is actually speaking to them. So one of the things that one can do is actually create those platforms for youth, or ride on the existing platform of women and maybe use CLF as an anchoring institution that can run a youth enterprise or youth facilitation hub, and wherein all these things are possible. And thirdly, I think many a times we actually miss out on the humane aspect of this work. So if we see in villages, we have a song maybe for every economic activity that they do. Let's say farming, you have a song from pre-sowing to your all practices to harvesting. But in there has been 18 years since Narega was launched. We do not have a song for Narega. We do not have them. Like, people are not working and singing a song for Narega. Now, why is that? We need to think. My point is, when we are designing solution for youth, we need to take these aspects as well.
Yeah.
So like, their sport, their music, their art needs to be connected with all of these opportunities. I see a great opportunity, ma'am, as I mentioned. Through Narega, we now need to develop infrastructure that actually, but we need to move beyond the wage labor aspect of Narega. And also, like, sustainable livelihoods has said, we need to focus on manufacturing infrastructure creation. And that is where I see the opportunity.
Excellent. So I'm going to ask the panel just maybe one question, and then also use that to ask them to make their closing remarks, because I'm very conscious of time. We've talked about all sorts of stuff. We haven't talked about one big elephant in the room as far as India is concerned, and that is the lack of female labor force participation. I mean, it's a huge topic, so I don't know how you're going to answer me in 1 minute, but the question is, how can we try to shift, one more shift, the way in which women participate or don't participate in the labor force in India, in order to achieve our ambitions for the opportunity that is, the young future of India. So maybe, do you want to go first? Or Alice? And then Anu, as this is about women, and then we'll come to the two men on the dais.
Sure, I'll start. And we've thought about this issue quite significantly. And even though maybe the statistics are showing labor force participation of women is declining, the actual labor activity of women is not necessarily declining. It's just not being recorded properly. In many cases, informal work, multiple.
Paid for.
Yes, not being paid for. Exactly. And so from what we've heard, I'll mention just three things. And again, this is a huge issue. One is how critical childcare is for women. And so having home-based care in the community, having more local centers, there are Anganwadi centers, but how do we extend that in terms of childcare, not just health? So there's major initiatives that really need to understand not just labor force participation and inclusion of women, but really women-directed initiatives to really understand their lived experience. And so childcare is a huge one for them, and really having a holistic view of what's critical for them to have that be addressed. And of course, childcare also builds a much more smarter, better workforce of any country. And so it really is both improving the situation for women as well as the future of any population. The other thing is creating more local opportunities. It's much more difficult for women to migrate out. And yes, young people have said, as long as they have a certain, as Anu was mentioning, monthly income, they don't want to necessarily migrate. For women, it's even more the case. They want to be in their community, they want to be in their family and have that social infrastructure. And so being able to create those local opportunities in the home, digital, local manufacturing, so many things. And so how do we really recognize that, pay for that, support that, so that we really look at their income, their savings, their asset building, similar to the way that NRLM has been doing for years. And so those are a couple of points there, but I would like to close with, there is a building kind of thinking that how do we have more of a, and this is a term we've been thinking about, kind of a national youth rural livelihood mission, the NRLM, but for young people, so NYRLM or something along those lines, and very much inclusive of young people to be able to be this new future, this again, coming back to rural renaissance and the amazing potential that India has. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. Anu, do you want to add anything very quickly?
So two things, to build on Alice's point, if there's customized programming that's done, so there can't be skilling programming and then, oh, by the way, some participants are women. They need very, very different supports like childcare, etc. The second thing is that the opportunities that most young men need at 21, 22, most women will need at around 34, 35 when the kids have grown up, and then they can enter the workforce. That's one piece of it. So how to really have very, very customized supports for women. The second thing is, I think, a little bit out of the purview of this specific conversation, but how to really look at kind of like land ownership, ownership over finances, change those things, because we already know that when women are part of SHGs, they become higher up in the decision-making hierarchy in their houses. So first, the husband will just go and buy something, but then they will have to ask their wives for, can you borrow from your group? So then the decision-making power slowly increases. So there's a little bit of even that, thinking about planning around savings, etc., thinking about how this economic empowerment really works and recognizing that, then I think that will also create a little bit of a shift.
Thank you. Thank you, Anu. Would you like to go next?
I support Alice's assertion that if you create local opportunities, there will be much more labor participation. For instance, within Narega is, as I mentioned, it's a fallback option, it's a social security scheme. Basically, within that, the participation rate of women is 57%. So it's much more than men. And plus, creation of proper childcare facilities, as was mentioned, and also to do something. I don't know how it will happen in terms of technology or in terms of other things, to take the drudgery out of their home chores. So the amount of time devoted to household work is also an impediment to their participation in the labor force. I think that's it.
Thank you. Shishir, you get the last word.
Plus some attitudinal change as well.
Yeah, so I actually will pick from there. I was going to speak on that. So we have books full of actually suggestions on what is actually impeding the female participation in labor force. What I sincerely feel is we need to work with men, that they are the problem, and slightly controversial.
I'm glad you said it.
Yeah, and because what is stopping women otherwise? Like, you know, your agriculture labor is your woman. Your, like, you know, most of whatever labor you are doing in even the burden of like, you know, mobilizing yourself and, like, you know, getting into economic activity is on the woman. What are the men doing in the village? So, like, you know, that is where the problem lies, and you need to actually speak to them. We need to engage more with them. And I think that will solve a lot of issues. One thing that I'll like to respond to Alice is I don't think we should get into another National Youth Livelihoods Mission that will create another, like, you know, entire administrative structure. But we can create a program like the Lakpati Mahila Initiative within NRLM. We can have a youth-focused, a local place-based opportunity development focused program that can, like, you know, be embedded within the current system only. We have everything anyway, like, you know, all the programs lie in under SIR's purview, and, like, you know, they just need to be brought together. So that.
Thank you, Shishir. And I think we're already 10 minutes over the end of this program. So I am going to thank this wonderful panel, Alice, Shishir, Singh, Anu. Thank you very much. Really appreciate the opportunity to sit here and talk with you, and thanks to all of you who are listening. I'm sorry we couldn't invite more comments and suggestions from there, but I think I'll get hounded out if I don't give up this dais. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of you for such a compelling conversation on rural youth aspirations, and, you know, touching upon the contours of mega trends, tech revolution, farm and non-farm opportunities in upcoming times. Really thanks a lot on this, and I'll request Bharti ma'am to now felicitate our guests for their participation in the insightful conversation to the India Rural Colloquy. Yes. Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I now hand over the baton of India Rural Colloquy to Lindy. Lindy, our TRI Director of Communications, to conclude the colloquy and also open up opportunities. What do we do next, and what are going to be our next set of actionables? So, thank you all from my side.
Thank you so much, Mala, for proceeding over today. And thanks you everyone that's here for staying with us, not just through today, which has been action-packed. We've had so much. We've even had the sort of dramatic entry from the Honorable Minister of Education that came in the middle of what was a really riveting session with so many people from rural India here in the capital, letting their voices be heard. It has been an intense 8 days, and it all started last month with our 3 regional colloquies as well. We saw those highlights at the beginning of today, and now I'd like to take a few minutes. It is more than 5, but it's less than 10. But it's fun to play the highlights that we've had from Delhi, because I know not all of you have seen every little bit. And we're also going to tantalize you with what happened on Saturday and Sunday, when we added a little bit of a cultural element to the India Rural Colloquy this year. So please sit back and relax. Next year we'll have popcorn for this moment, and watch the highlights from the Delhi chapter of the colloquy.
Thank you for being part of the 3rd annual India Rural Colloquy. We are delighted to have everyone here, and we're delighted to have a full house online as well. Is India on the verge or the precipice of a rural renaissance? Well, that is what we're here to discuss today.
And we have a Starcast panel with us to give us the first session.
May have a 5 trillion economy, but unless we fix our environmental capital, natural capital, and our social capital, we may not be a society worth living in.
The pyramid of aspiration has become flat. Today, a 15-year-old son of a very rich person and a poor person's son in a very remote village have the same dreams.
Connecting the dots, we are moving in the right direction, and we will need to invest more and more in building these collectives of women.
So first of all, I just want to say how timely this survey is. It's quite incredible that we have such little this kind of population level data. So these results are incredibly important.
And in a room where I hear India is so complex because of its diversity, I said no. It's beautiful because of its diversity. What it's complex is the mind of those thinking that the structure should be, we should put the context in the structure.
Now we all know that the more women into the workforce, or more women into the workplaces as well as in public spaces, that only creates an environment for women's safety and women's agency, women's welfare, and all the other things, which ultimately leads to the gender equality.
Demonstrate benefit to beneficiaries. We're very happy to adopt technology. Okay, so surely, as I said, keeping complexity of technology behind and delivering it in the hands the way they are comfortable using is number one. Number two is demonstrating benefit. Three, making sure you get people in their own community using it upfront and showing that it's easy. अरे राम कर सकता तो शाम तो नहीं कर सकता. I think it's as simple as that.
We shouldn't be sitting with technology that's 5 years old or 10 years old and then struggling to try and make it move faster in this rapidly changing space, right?
villagesquare.in. Every day we're putting out news stories from rural India. Because as I said, we're trying to get young urban India interested in what's happening in the hinterlands. Our Village Square Fellowship.
So this fellowship started 9 months back, and how time flies. We tried to create a kind of a virtual newsroom so that all these young boys and girls.
Sir, if you could unveil this book. There we go. Fabulous.
Second cohort of the Village Square Fellowship opens today, and there are some QR codes you can see around which says Village Square commencing on 1st November. I'll request whoever is interested just scan that QR code and apply.
We will talk food, farmers, markets, millets, and more. We think that millets are maybe unknown to Indians, but that's not necessarily the case, is it?
Around 60-65% of India at some point or the other, whether it's once or whether it's regularly, have consumed millets. Out of those 60-65%, about 15% consume it regularly as part of their regular household diet.
Being from Uttarakhand myself, my family has been having millets, barnyard millets specifically, and what you just mentioned, since ages, and I did not know about it until a few years back. So ever since then, I started creating content, got into food blogging and everything. I started exploring millets.
So the dosa is amazing, the pancake was amazing, and I think we're having breakfast, lunch, everything together. So.
Now poor are in the minority, whatever I'm not getting into the numbers. But even if you are seeing that 25% are poor, we are still in a minority. What do we do about it? But we have to note that our concept of poverty is something which is 50-60 years old. So we have to rework. It's a social construct. It's not an economic construct.
तो थोड़ा सा बताइए कि आपको कैसे आपने शुरू किया और कहाँ आप कर पाए, कहाँ मुश्किल आई, कहाँ आपको किसी ने मदद की?
पहले तो हम ये समूह में जुड़े थे, लेकिन ये परियोजनाएं सचेत दीदियां हम जुड़ी और धीरे धीरे ट्रेनिंग में जाने लगे, ग्राम सभा में अपने मुद्दे रखे। तो हमने सचेत दीदियों ने सोचा क्यों ना हम भी राजनीति में उतर जाएं। पंचायत में सभी दीदियां चलो पंच का फॉर्म डाल दें, लेकिन दूसरे वार्ड के लोगों ने भी हमारे सामने फॉर्म डाल दिए कि इनको हराना है।
Knowledge will travel through some idea. It has to have some language. It has to have some form, some एक आकार रहेगा. ज्ञान एक आकार में परिवर्तित होगा.
1 से 8 अगस्त तक सर, वो जो अगस्त क्रांति का हफ्ता है सर, उसमें हम लोगों ने ये चर्चा की। और अभी जो चर्चा हो रही थी सर, वो पूरी ही सर नागरिक के नजरिए से सरकार और समाज को किस प्रकार से हम लोग देख सकते हैं सर, वो भी मातृभाषा में ही हो रही थी सर।
Wow. I'm actually sort of a little amazed that we've gotten through all of that. And as you know, there were so many omissions and things that we wanted to include in that. And we will probably include, obviously, from this last session and the one prior to that as well, which we couldn't just get in time for this. So there will be a director's cut coming up. And we will, of course, put that on our YouTube channel along with all the sessions and all the highlights. And then we'll get ready to do it all again next year. But before we close, I would like to please call upon the co-lead, co-founder of Transform Rural India, Anupam Ghosh, to give us the final words and what we can do with these actionable ideas and solutions that have been discussed over not just the 8 days, but even the 3 days in our states before that. Please, Anupam.
Thanks, Lindy. I think we are going horribly late. We are almost at 6 now. So I wouldn't even attempt to, there were 17 conversations and over 50 speakers, and the kind of notes we have personally have made. Each of those sessions, the 90-minute session itself, will have 10 or 12 actionable points. And many of them were things which we have been thinking about, but not in the the top list of agenda to be put on. So many of these conversations, I think, has laid out a whole set of things which we at TRI need to absorb and prioritize in our coming engagements. Like even in the last session, this question of female participation in the labor force. We actually spent 2 hours, Bharti, in one of those conversations, and there were so many of those actionable things which came up, and possibly it needs to be very quickly tried out in the places in our community action labs to see how many of these are usable to make a dent in the kind of social context we are currently working about. Similarly, every item, every discussion has been interesting, and like these 2 days which we did in Delhi Heart, it has opened up a very different possibility. We have never done that kind of an engagement in my almost 30 years in the development sector. We haven't engaged that way with the the public at large. So that also opens up a lot of possibilities, and we need to think possibly next year how do we create that space in a format which draws in more people into the issues which we have been struggling upon. So on the whole, I would say it has been a wonderful 8 days of engagement and lots of things to do at our end, and we look forward to the next year. And one special mention which I will have is this year the entire backend has been handled by a team which has taken charge and distributed the responsibility. Each and every session was handled by a session anchor. They did all the detailing, they talked to the panelists, they curated the sessions, they finally executed, and under the able leadership of Lindy and Mala, this whole thing has got executed. So Anish and I have been reasonably free this year. on this. And thank you.
We might not let you get away with that next year. But I'll also have to say it was Lindy Mala Niraj as well, who can't be here because his wife is heavily pregnant. So we finally let him tend to that. But I also lastly just want to say yes to the session anchors. Y'all rocked it, and your team that helped, and the state leads, and the massive amount of people in the states that helped pull those 3 city events off. Seriously impressive. And also the people in the admin who've been back there busy at work helping, and the Village Square team who helped us with the Dilly Hut events. I could say thank you. And of course, how can I forget Gori over there, who's our tech head, who's just pulled this off and stays so calm and cool. And lastly, of course, I thank all of you who are here in this room, who've been here day in and day out, and who are also online tuning in and have been dedicated to engaging, because we're part of the change. And isn't that cool to feel like that? So thank you very much. And here's to next year. Bye-bye.